In the dusty frontier town of Gallup, New Mexico, in 1892, a single dollar bill would spark a confrontation that would expose the brutal reality of racial exploitation in the American West. What began as a routine transaction at a human auction would transform into a stunning revelation of hidden identity and cultural pride. When ranch owner Buck Morrison thought he was purchasing a helpless victim for pocket change, he had no idea he was about to face the wisdom and strength of the Navajo people. This is the incredible true story of Maria Begay, a woman who turned her greatest moment of humiliation into an unforgettable lesson about respect, dignity, and the power of cultural identity that her oppressor would never forget. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in justice, comment what you think happened next, and subscribe for more incredible stories of courage that changed history forever. The sun blazed mercilessly over Gallup, New Mexico on that scorching August morning in 1892, when the monthly labor auction drew its usual crowd of ranchers, miners, and desperate opportunists. The town square buzzed with the harsh voices of men haggling over human lives as if they were livestock, a practice that had become disturbingly common in the post-Civil War frontier despite its questionable legality. Buck Morrison adjusted his worn leather hat and spat tobacco juice into the dust, surveying the line of potential workers with the calculating eye of a man, accustomed to getting bargains. At 45, Morrison owned one of the largest cattle ranches in the territory, built on the backs of underpaid laborers and maintained through intimidation and exploitation of anyone desperate enough to work for him. The auctioneer, a greasy man named Silas Creek, called out the day's offerings with theatrical flair that barely concealed the human trafficking occurring in broad daylight. "Strong backs, willing hands, and rock-bottom prices," he shouted, gesturing toward a group of Native Americans, Mexican immigrants, and down-on-their-luck drifters who had little choice but to submit to this degrading process. Near the end of the line stood a young woman who immediately caught Morrison's attention, though not for reasons of respect or admiration. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with long black hair braided simply and clothing that marked her as indigent. Her downcast eyes and submissive posture suggested someone broken by circumstances, exactly the type of worker Morrison preferred. "What about that one?" Morrison called out, pointing a calloused finger toward the young woman. "She looks like she can work kitchen and laundry without causing trouble." His tone carried the casual cruelty of a man who had never considered the humanity of those he employed, viewing people as mere tools for his financial gain. Silas Creek grinned, recognizing an easy sale when he saw one. "Ah, that's a fine choice, Mr. Morrison. Young, healthy, and quiet as a church mouse. She came in yesterday with a group from the reservation, says she needs work to feed her family." The auctioneer's words dripped with false sympathy for circumstances he helped perpetuate. The bidding began at $5, but Morrison's reputation for harsh treatment kept other potential employers at bay. Within minutes, the price had dropped to $3, then $2, as the other ranchers found more appealing options among the desperate workers. Morrison waited patiently, knowing that desperation would eventually work in his favor, as it always did. "Do I hear $1? Creek called out, his voice losing its earlier enthusiasm as the crowd's attention shifted to other prospects. "Surely someone needs good household help for just $1? The humiliation of the moment hung heavy in the desert air, a testament to how thoroughly the frontier had dehumanized those it considered expendable. Morrison raised his hand with theatrical slowness, savoring the moment of ultimate degradation he was about to inflict. $1, he announced loudly, ensuring everyone present could witness this ultimate insult to human dignity. "That's all she's worth to me, and probably more than she's worth to anyone else in this godforsaken territory." The auctioneer's gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo off the adobe buildings surrounding the square. "Sold to Buck Morrison for $1, Creek announced, completing a transaction that reduced a human being to less value than a cup of coffee or a shot of whiskey in the local saloon. Morrison approached his new employee with the swagger of a man who believed his money gave him ownership over another person's life and dignity. "You belong to me now, girl," he said, fishing a crumpled dollar bill from his vest pocket. "Work hard, keep quiet, and we'll get along just fine. 'Cause trouble, and you'll find yourself back here begging for someone else to take you." The young woman accepted the dollar with hands that trembled slightly, though whether from fear, anger, or something else entirely, Morrison couldn't tell and didn't care to investigate. She nodded silently, keeping her eyes fixed on the ground in what he interpreted as appropriate submission to his authority and superior social position in their harsh frontier society. As they walked toward Morrison's wagon, he felt the satisfaction of a man who had just acquired valuable property at an impossibly low price. He had no idea that the quiet young woman walking behind him carried secrets that would soon transform his moment of triumph into an experience he would never forget and never repeat. What Buck Morrison didn't know as he loaded his new worker into his dusty wagon was that Maria Begay had not ended up at that auction by accident or desperation. She was there by choice, as part of a carefully planned mission that had been months in the making. Her apparent poverty and submission were carefully crafted performances designed to infiltrate Morrison's ranch and gather evidence of his illegal treatment of Native American workers. Maria was not just any Navajo woman, she was the granddaughter of Chief Manuelito, one of the most respected leaders in Navajo history, and the daughter of a prominent medicine man who had taught her to speak 5 languages fluently. Her education at a government boarding school had been supplemented by traditional Navajo teachings, creating a unique blend of modern knowledge and ancient wisdom that made her exceptionally capable. For months, Navajo tribal leaders had been receiving reports of missing community members who had gone to work for Morrison and were never seen again. Families spoke of loved ones who had taken jobs at his ranch only to vanish without a trace, their fate unknown, but feared to be tragic. Traditional investigative methods had failed to penetrate Morrison's operation. The tribal council had chosen Maria for this dangerous mission because of her unique qualifications and her burning desire for justice. Her own younger brother, Joseph, had disappeared after taking work at Morrison's ranch the previous spring. His letters had stopped abruptly after describing brutal working conditions and threats against anyone who tried to leave Morrison's employment. Maria had spent weeks preparing for her role, studying the mannerisms and speech patterns of women broken by poverty and circumstance. She practiced walking with the defeated posture of someone who had given up hope, learned to keep her eyes downcast in apparent submission, and rehearsed the story of desperate need that would make her an attractive target for exploitation. The dollar Morrison had paid for her services would become a symbol of something far more significant than he could imagine. Maria carefully folded the crumpled bill and placed it in a small leather pouch she wore beneath her worn dress, next to a piece of turquoise that had belonged to her missing brother. The turquoise would guide her mission. The dollar would remind her of the insult that needed to be answered. As Morrison's wagon bounced along the dusty trail toward his ranch, Maria used her peripheral vision to memorize every detail of the landscape, every landmark that might be important for her eventual escape or for guiding others to this remote location. Her trained mind catalogued distances, noting water sources and potential shelter points with the precision of someone raised in harsh desert conditions. Morrison's ranch sprawled across a valley surrounded by red rock formations, isolated enough to conduct illegal activities without fear of discovery by territorial authorities. The main house was a substantial adobe structure that spoke of prosperity built on others' suffering, while the workers' quarters were little more than makeshift shacks that wouldn't have been suitable for livestock in civilized areas. "You'll stay in the women's quarters," Morrison announced as they approached the compound. Work starts before dawn, ends after dark. You'll help in the kitchen, do laundry, and clean the main house. Step out of line once, and you'll regret it for however long you have left to regret anything." His threats carried the weight of practiced cruelty. Maria was introduced to the other workers, a mixture of Native Americans, Mexican immigrants, and others who had fallen through society's cracks. She immediately recognized the signs of people living in fear, the way they avoided eye contact, the nervous glances toward the main house, the careful way they spoke when any of Morrison's men were within hearing distance. That first night, huddled in the cramped women's quarters, Maria listened to whispered stories that confirmed her worst fears about Morrison's operation. Workers spoke of colleagues who had tried to leave and were never seen again, of brutal punishments for minor infractions, of a system designed to trap people in permanent servitude through debt and intimidation. An elderly Navajo woman named Sarah Yazzie recognized something familiar in Maria's bearing, despite her careful disguise. "You carry yourself like someone from the old families," she whispered in Navajo during the pre-dawn darkness. "Your grandmother taught you well, even if you pretend to be broken." Maria's heart raced, knowing her cover might be compromised, but also feeling the first spark of hope. For 3 weeks, Maria played her role perfectly while secretly documenting Morrison's illegal activities and searching for any trace of her missing brother Joseph. She memorized work schedules, mapped the ranch's layout, and identified which of Morrison's men were most dangerous. Every detail was carefully stored in her trained memory, preparing for the moment when she would reveal her true purpose. The break she had been waiting for came when she discovered a hidden storage room beneath Morrison's main house while cleaning. Inside, she found personal belongings that had obviously been taken from workers: jewelry, family photographs, letters, and identification papers that told the story of people who had simply vanished. Among these tragic remnants, she found Joseph's distinctive silver bracelet, confirming her worst fears. That evening, Maria made her decision. She had gathered enough evidence to expose Morrison's operation, and she had confirmed her brother's fate. The time for pretense was over, and the time for Navajo Justice had begun. She began preparing for a confrontation that would reveal the true power of the culture Morrison had spent years exploiting and underestimating. The next morning, Morrison summoned Maria to his private office for what he clearly intended as a humiliating reminder of her supposed inferiority. "You've been here 3 weeks, he sneered, leaning back in his leather chair with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. "Time you understood exactly what your place is in my operation, girl." Maria stood before Morrison's desk with the same downcast posture she had maintained since her arrival, but something in her stillness should have warned him that circumstances were about to change dramatically. When she finally raised her eyes to meet his, Morrison saw something that made him instinctively lean back in his chair: intelligence, strength, and a burning purpose that had nothing to do with submission. "You paid $1 for me, cowboy," Maria said, her voice carrying none of the broken submission Morrison expected. Instead, her words rang with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. "But I am Navajo!" She straightened to her full height, and Morrison suddenly realized he had been completely deceived about the nature of the woman he thought he owned. "My name is Maria Begay," she continued, removing the leather pouch from beneath her dress and placing Morrison's crumpled dollar bill on his desk alongside her brother's silver bracelet. "Granddaughter of Chief Manuelito, daughter of Medicine Man Thomas Begay, and I have come to collect a debt you owe to my people." Morrison's face went white as he recognized the bracelet and understood the implications of Maria's revelation. He reached for the gun in his desk drawer, but Maria was faster, having anticipated this reaction. Years of traditional Navajo training combined with her government school education had made her formidable in ways Morrison's limited worldview couldn't comprehend. "Your brother came here willingly," Morrison stammered, trying to regain control of a situation that had shifted beyond his understanding. He worked here fair and square, earned his wages, and left when he wanted to. I don't know nothing about any bracelet, but his nervous gestures and sweating forehead betrayed the lies he was telling. Maria pulled out a bundle of papers she had hidden in her clothing, detailed notes about Morrison's illegal activities, maps of his property, and a list of missing workers that she had compiled during her weeks of careful investigation. "These documents tell a different story," she said calmly. "They tell the story of a man who traps workers in debt slavery, who makes people disappear when they try to leave." Morrison's ranch hands, drawn by the raised voices, began gathering outside the office windows. But instead of providing him with backup, they found themselves facing something unprecedented. A dozen Navajo warriors, who had been positioned around the ranch since before dawn, led by Maria's father and uncle. The rescue mission had been planned as carefully as Maria's infiltration. The power dynamic in the room shifted completely as Morrison realized he was surrounded and outmaneuvered by people he had consistently underestimated. The woman he had purchased for $1 had revealed herself as someone with the authority to bring his entire operation crashing down, backed by a community that would no longer tolerate his crimes against their people. Within hours, Morrison's ranch was transformed from a site of exploitation into a scene of liberation as Navajo warriors systematically dismantled his illegal operation. The workers who had lived in fear were offered safe passage home, while evidence of Morrison's crimes was carefully documented by tribal leaders who understood the importance of building a legal case that would hold up in territorial courts. Maria's father, Thomas Begay, confronted Morrison with the quiet dignity that had made him a respected leader among his people. "You have stolen lives, stolen dignity, stolen hope from families across our nation," he said in perfect English, his voice carrying generations of wisdom and authority. "Today, that theft ends and justice begins." The silver bracelet on Morrison's desk became the centerpiece of evidence that would eventually lead to his prosecution for human trafficking, illegal imprisonment, and multiple murders. Joseph Begay's body was found in a hidden grave on Morrison's property, along with the remains of 6 other workers who had tried to leave. Their families finally had closure, and Morrison faced justice for his crimes. Morrison's financial empire crumbled as quickly as his confidence had evaporated when Maria revealed her true identity. His ranch was seized by territorial authorities, his bank accounts frozen, and his reputation destroyed throughout New Mexico. The man who had thought himself above the law discovered that justice could come from unexpected directions when communities united to protect their own. The crumpled dollar bill that Morrison had used to purchase what he thought was a helpless victim became a symbol in Navajo communities of the power of intelligence, courage, and cultural pride. Maria kept it as a reminder that even the most degrading circumstances could be transformed into opportunities for justice when approached with wisdom and determination. Maria Begay's mission had accomplished far more than just exposing one criminal operation. Her courage inspired other Native American communities to organize similar investigations into exploitation and abuse, creating a network of resistance that would protect vulnerable people for decades to come. She became a respected leader in her own right, carrying forward her grandfather's legacy of protecting Navajo interests. The story of the woman who was sold for $1 but revealed herself as priceless spread throughout the Southwest, becoming a cautionary tale for those who would exploit indigenous peoples and an inspiration for communities fighting against injustice. It demonstrated that assumptions based on prejudice and ignorance could be deadly for those who held them. Morrison spent his remaining years in territorial prison, where he discovered that his reputation as an exploiter of Native Americans made him few friends among fellow inmates. He died in 1897, unmourned and forgotten except as a footnote in the larger story of justice prevailing over oppression through courage and community solidarity. Thomas Begay used the evidence gathered during Maria's mission to help establish new legal protections for Native American workers throughout the territory. His advocacy contributed to reforms that made operations like Morrison's much more difficult to maintain, protecting countless people from similar exploitation in the years that followed. The Navajo community honored Maria's courage, with ceremonies that celebrated not just her individual bravery, but the power of traditional values combined with modern knowledge. Her story became part of tribal oral history, passed down to inspire future generations facing their own challenges with dignity and determination. Years later, Maria would tell her own children and grandchildren about the day she stood in Buck Morrison's office and watched a man's world collapse when he realized he had tried to purchase someone whose true value was beyond his ability to comprehend. The dollar bill remained in her family as a reminder that worth is not determined by others' valuations. The empty ranch that had once been Morrison's domain was eventually purchased by the Navajo Nation and transformed into a community center that provided education and support services for tribal members. Where exploitation had once flourished, healing and empowerment took root, completing the transformation from a site of suffering into a symbol of hope and justice.